Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here on our episode 1937 of the Cabral Concept, going over what foods are high in mold and mycotoxins. One of the most popular topics in natural health right now, and it's really been building over the past few years, is this issue around our health, inflammation, and dis-ease in the body as related to mold. And as you're about to learn on this show, mold doesn't just come from an environment. A lot of times we believe that we get molds into our body by breathing in the mold spores from black mold in our house, whether it be in the air conditioning vents, the heating vents, whether it's behind sheetrock from water damage, or in the ceiling from a bathtub leaking or a water heater leaking before in the past. All of those things are true, without a doubt. And myself, living in the Northeast, where mold is absolutely pervasive, it's actually in a lot of the air that you breathe. The aspergillus-based strains come in the fall with the leaves rotting and decaying, as well as in the spring when the grass and those decayed leaves also leave mold in the air as well. So we can definitely get mold from inside our homes, and we can get it from the air that we breathe, which is why, again, in my opinion, you do want a lab test for it to see if you have high levels of mycotoxins, or begin a mold-based protocol to get these things out of your body. And one of the other things that can help tremendously is sauna as well. So it's nice to know that you can actually sweat and get some of these mold spores or this mold out of your body as well. So let's just quickly define mold, mold as a fungus, and mycotoxins as the byproduct, the toxins that are produced by the fungus itself, which is mold. So the problem is, and again, why don't I just give you the where you can find these right now, and then we'll get into all the different specifics and about a dozen different foods to really be careful of. It doesn't mean you can't eat them. It means that you just need to make sure that they're mold free, and I'll show you how to do that. So, all right, the lab for mold testing, you can go to equi.life, equi.life/labs, and you can simply click on the mold lab. It's a simple urine test to see if you have high levels of mycotoxins, which are the mold toxins in your body. Because if you have mold toxins in your body, that means you're being exposed to environmentally or internally from mold. All right. So really, really important. And then you can begin the mold protocol. And if you want to find that, you can literally just go to equi.life, equi.life, and then in the search box, just type in mold protocol and you'll be able to find it right there. So that's that. What I want to do today, though, is I really want to go over the foods that you should be most worried about. So there's about a dozen different mycotoxin markers that we look for that are food-based as well as environmental-based. We're going to really stay focused on what are the foods that might have mold on them or in them and be producing mycotoxins right there inside of the food. So again, why is this so dangerous? Well, mold has now been shown through its mycotoxins to shut down your own immune system. That means it begins to actually cause autoimmune issues due to the fact that it will protect itself in its environment, which is now you, by releasing these mycotoxins. So ochratoxin A is actually a very well-known one that begins to shut down the immune system, so your immune system does not go after the mold in your own body. I mean, it's pretty wild how these things work. So what we need to do is actually go after the mold do our detoxes as well, use our sauna, like a functional medicine detox, to open up the liver pathways. And then we are able to, by proxy, get rid of a lot of the mycotoxins as well. Because remember, it's fine to get rid of the mycotoxins, but what you really need to do is get rid of the source. Because if you don't get rid of the source, then you're always worried just simply about binding up all of the mycotoxins. So people are always talking about binders. I get it, but what you really need to be talking about is getting rid of the source. And binders can be great, but binders can't, and nor should they be used for long-term usage, simply because binders bind up a lot of things, not just toxins. So if you're always using charcoal or other types of binders, you can be binding up a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you should be digesting and absorbing rather than binding them up and getting them out of the body, right? So we're a big fan of binders. We use what's called a intestinal cleanse for about 5 days during a mold protocol, during a parasite protocol, during a candida bacterial protocol. And again, that can be found at equa.life. That's basically our whole functional medicine practice from Boston, now put online for the whole world to be able to see an open source. So whether you ever choose to work with EquaLife, that's completely fine. Or if you don't, like, again, that's great too, but you can see everything that we do and it works. Again, we've been doing this now for many, many years, worked with over 250,000 client appointments, and we have the data that shows that, like, again, this works. So again, we're not providing medical advice, we're not providing treatment protocols, but we are helping you to rebalance the underlying root cause of health issues. So let's go over now. Again, if you want to learn more about mold, why don't I do this? Because I don't want to I don't want to reiterate things that I've talked about in terms of mold before in the past. So if you don't know how dangerous mold really is, I want you to go to stevencabral.com/1937. On that page, you'll always get the show notes from today. You'll get the previous podcast that I'm going to link up on mold. And then you'll also get my 3 big takeaways from the show as well. And then, of course, any links that we need to link to. All right, so let's get started. So I want to go over a few of the ones and categories that are the most dangerous, okay? So you want to look at the categories of nuts first. All right. So I know a lot of people are eating nuts because of all the health benefits from the antioxidants and some of the monounsaturated and non-oxidized polyunsaturated. So for example, raw Brazil nuts could be great, or sprouted pumpkin seeds. All of these things can be fantastic. However, what we have to watch for is that especially peanuts, and I know corn's more of a pseudo grain. I'm going to throw corn in there as well right now. Pistachios, pumpkin seeds, some Brazil nuts, and believe it or not, even watermelon seeds can have mold. All right, so it's really important that we look for companies that show that it's been tested for mold, right? And if it's been tested for mold, then it's good. Like, these things are healthy things to be able to eat. Now, I will also say that a lot of these that come in a shell can oftentimes have less mold. However, peanuts does not fit that bill because there is a lot of moisture that can get right through that peanut shell, and there's space, there's air between the peanut itself and the shell. So I want you to watch out for that in terms of nuts themselves. And what I want to say is, again, I don't want to push people away from eating nuts. I just want to make sure that if you're putting yourself on a little bit of a lower mold diet, that you're staying away from the nuts that I just mentioned, at least for now. Maybe you're having macadamia nuts instead right now, or maybe some almonds or something like that. I want to move to another category, though. And this category is really important that we look at. And I think it's one of the reasons why people feel better removing a lot of grains from their diet. So a lot of people blame grains for everything, like literally because of the phytic acid, because of some of the fructans, because of the lectins, and now we have mold as well, right? So there's so many reasons why someone might feel better from removing grains. The digestibility, the insulin factor or the blood glucose factor. So there's many different reasons. And during our 21-day functional medicine detox, we remove those as well. Again, we remove grains during the first 21 days of our Fat Velocity weight loss program. We remove grains. So we understand it. However, grains certain grains can also be quite healthy for you. I'm going to link up the show on why gluten is not a healthy grain. And that is going to be, I'll see if I can find that episode for you. That's episode 1908, the real reason why wheat and gluten are dangerous to consume. And I'm going to share that with everyone because it's inflammatory, right? Even based, no matter who you are, it's either partially or majorly inflammatory. But not all grains contain a lot of gluten. But let's give you those. So this one especially is these grains harbor mold, because what happens is they get put in these big silos and there's some dampness, and that dampness just is a breeding ground for mold. And then from mold, we get all of the mycotoxins from there as well. So corn, barley, wheat, and sometimes oats as well contain mold. So what do we do? Well, if we want to eat one of the more healthier ones like oats, we need to make sure that we are purchasing from a company that does mold testing for their oats. And again, I don't want to give a specific brand right now, because what happens is someone listens to this 5 years from now and maybe they do mold testing, maybe they don't, maybe that company is no longer around. But you can do a pretty good search right online to be able to find, just search mold-free oats, and you'll probably find one of the brands that I use as well. Oat groats, which are still more bound up instead of cut, are going to be less prone to mold as well. All right. So they're not flattened. They're a little less prone. Oat groats are absolutely tasty. They're a little bit more nutty. They're a little bit more hearty. They're a little bit more chewy. So if you like eating a little bit more, like chewing, oat groats can be a great one. All right. So corn, barley, wheat, and oats are definitely some of those grains that we're going to be a little bit more leery of. Some people add rice to the list. Rice can be a factor. I mean, thousands of years ago, they knew this in traditional Chinese medicine, using a lot of rice in the diet as well, but not as typical. But certainly there can be mold with rice, no doubt about it. Good brands will not have mold in their rice, but certainly if it's been sitting around for a while, it's gotten exposed to moisture and dampness, rice could be a part of that. I'll do a quick summary in just a moment. Okay. Another big one that I always have my clients with allergies or asthma or histamine issues or runny nose, postnasal drip, any of these issues, which I should have mentioned earlier in the show, could all be signs of mold, stomach-based issues, cramping, brain fog. I have them remove any type of dry fruit if they're eating dried fruit in their diet. Typically, I don't recommend dry fruit for anyone, meaning I don't see that you need to eat dry fruit or why you really would, to be honest with you. People consume more of it, which means they're consuming more fructose than they really need to be, because I'm a big believer in fruit, but I'm not a big believer in dry fruit, which is just much easier to consume a lot of it because it's dried, it's shrunk, it doesn't contain any of the water really. So now you're just consuming a lot more of the fruit than you would normally eat if it was a whole piece of fruit. However, I will say again, there's a time and place for everything, but dried fruit can contain quite a bit of mold, and fruit juices should be added to that category as well. So fruit juices, especially that come from apple and pears and maybe even prunes that we would add in that. What happens is the mold is on the outside of those, and they juice those without really washing and cleaning the outside. So now you get the mold. Now, I eat apples. I eat pears. I'm a huge advocate of apples. You will hear that, on yesterday's show, right? Let me just check this out. So hopefully you tuned in yesterday, which was the top 7 cancer-fighting foods. And I'll give one away. It was apples. I won't tell you why, but on yesterday's show, it was apples. So what do? Well, you can easily get rid of mold. That's the nice thing. With anything that you're able to clean. Now, you really can't clean nuts that well. You really can't clean grains. It's not really possible. You could clean dry fruit to a degree, but as it's shriveling up and dehydrating and the skin is becoming more permeable, it could get into the dried fruit itself. However, with an apple or with a pear, it's actually quite easy to clean them. And I gave a anti-mold spray just a couple weeks ago on the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So check that out in episode 1929, and we'll link that up as well. StephenCabral.com/1 937 will be all the links today. All right. So we'll link up that previous one, which was on the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen, episode 1929, because the spray that I gave you or soak that I gave you will also take off mold as well. All right. Big one. The next one, which I know is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, is cheese. Cheese is one of the worst offenders for mold. You can walk into a great cheese shop. So I used to live in the south end of Boston. Love the south end of Boston. It's not Southie, it's not South Boston, which is great too, but it's the south end of Boston. It has the feel to the like Soho area in New York, although I haven't been there for at least 6-7 years, so I don't know that I can exactly say that. But it's all brownstones, it's small little stores, no chains. Not that there's anything wrong with chain stores, but it has just a great community feel, and that's where we wanted to raise our daughters. And so, we loved it, and we could walk to school. It was probably about like 3/4 of a mile of a walk, but a nice walk, especially in nice weather. So it was a good walk for our daughters and my wife. And anyway, a great area to live. And there's this shop called Formaggio. And Formaggio has a location in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as well as the South End. Well, I literally used to live 2 doors down from Formaggio. Beautiful, beautiful area right near Peters Park. If you're familiar with Boston, you're probably familiar with that area. And you walk in and they have one of the best cheese shops, I would say, in the Northeast for sure. I mean, it's remarkable. They actually have a location in New York as well, Formaggio in New York, if you want to check it out. So when you go in there, though, you see the mold on the outside of many of the cheese because that's how you actually age a lot of these cheeses. So how could you eat cheese and have it be less moldy? Well, what you want to do is you want to eat a fresher cheese, all right? A fresher cheese. So that's typically going to be a softer one. And in my opinion, aim for more of the goat's cheese or sheep's cheese for a healthier based variety. All right, a couple more that I want to give you would be, and this one I would say is important, especially for those people, again, with allergies, hives, asthma, itchy eyes, postnasal drip, anything to do with those histamine foods. Has it been aged? All right, so we already talked about what? Aged is dry fruit, okay? Aged is the cheeses. But what else is aged? Processed meats. Now, we already know if you tune back into the worst inflammatory foods that you could eat, that was episode 1916, processed foods was one of those 9 foods. So processed foods can definitely contain mold. Anything that's aged can be moldy, and that includes fermented foods, which is going to take out now some of those fermented veggies that a lot of people love, but also alcohol. Now, you can actually find wines and alcohol that are lower in mold. I recommend and had talked about dry farm wines on a previous podcast. We will link up that podcast as well for a review for them. I'm not a big wine drinker, but for those people that like wine and they want more of a clean, biodynamic, organic, lower mold, lower sulfite wine that's easier to drink, dry farm wines can be one of those great places to get those. And the lighter the wine or spirit or beer, the less mold that it will most likely contain. All right. So the lighter the variety, typically the less mold. A couple more that I wanted to share with you. And that next one, since I just went over dairy, I'm sure a lot of people's feelings, is condiments. Condiments fit into the aged or fermented because they contain quite a bit of vinegar. So that means that many of the mayonnaises and soy sauces could potentially have mold. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard about coffee containing mold before, and it's absolutely true, right? Absolutely true. A bunch of brands made a big name for themselves on basically testing their coffee for mold. And I think it's a great thing because honestly, there's over 18 different types of mycotoxins that can live on coffee beans alone. And coffee beans are really no different than, let's say, oats or something being stored in a huge storage container or silo. And if there's a little dampness in there in the atmosphere, I shouldn't say the atmosphere, but the environment around there, then they can start to collect mold. And as the mold begins to grow, it gives off mycotoxins. We ingest that through the coffee. and it can be an issue for our overall health. Those are the main ones that I wanted to give you, but now I want to sum it up to make it just a little bit easier for you. Anything aged or fermented could potentially have mold. Aged cheeses or dairy fit into that. Condiments or spices, I didn't mention spices, that have been sitting out for a long period of time that have been exposed to some damp air could have some mold. We talked about coffee. Dried fruits is another one. Apples and pears, fresh apples and pears can be one. However, one of the reasons why apples and pears, and I didn't even mention potatoes, they sometimes have more mold is because they're stored for months or maybe even a year at a time. So what do you need to do? Well, with the potato, you take a scrub brush, you scrub it clean, okay? I gave you the spray on the previous podcast. I'll link that up as to how to make it. Literally, I write down the ingredients on it. And same with the apples and pears. I eat apples, I eat pears, I just clean them. That's it. I just wash them off. That's it. Do it all at once. When you go grocery food shopping, put them back in your fridge, they're good to go. Nut butters, especially, peanuts is a big offender. They contain aflatoxins. You probably heard that before, aflatoxins. And one of the biggest ones is with peanuts and peanut butter. And then the one that surprises the most people for mold is typically processed-based meats. Processed meats going to contain, oftentimes they are aged, going to contain more mold sitting in there. They tend to contain more bacteria. More fermentation, which certainly is not good for the body. So what do? Do we need to eliminate all of those? I would say no. We want to eliminate the ones that we just really don't need to eat. Nobody needs to be taking in fruit juice. They really don't. Unless they're fresh, pressing it themselves for whatever reason, I would stick more towards a vegetable juice. Eat your fruit. You can press your veggies, some of your veggies. That's not an issue. Nobody needs to eat peanut butter. That's my Boston accent coming out right there, peanut butter. But for nut butters in general, stick to one of the ones that's going to be less mold, especially if you're dealing with these issues right now. And if you want to have one of like a pumpkin seed butter, which I love, you just want to go for a good, clean company that looks at molds. Nobody needs to eat processed meat. Processed meat are carcinogenic and absolutely doesn't mean it will, but can lead to cancer. For alcohol, go with the lighter colored alcohol, and whenever possible, see if the company does test for mold, and try not to drink that much alcohol in general. Cheese, I gave you a hint there. Go for more fresh varieties, ideally more goat's cheese or sheep's cheese. But if you have mold, allergies, asthma, a lot of brain fog, skin rashes, postnasal drip, stay away from dairy for right now. All right, definitely stay away from dairy. So hopefully that was helpful. That was a big rundown. I'm probably going to be going over a whole low mold diet in the future. So if that interests you, if you want me to do a podcast on what would a diet look like, that's at lower in mold foods for a breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, let me know in the comments. For sure, just leave that there on Instagram or YouTube. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if this show is helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. And before you go, I want to make sure that you know that EcoLife is back. We are back offering our full spectrum, organic, and USA grown hemp oil, or CBD oil as it's known, over at equilibriumcbd.com. That is our sister site, and that is because we are not able to offer CBD oil over on Equa.life. The powers that be have finally allowed us to offer CBD oil again. Many of you who have been with us for a while know that we offered literally the highest quality, most efficacious product in the market just about 2 years ago, before we were shut down from offering CBD oil. Well, we've tried really hard, we worked really hard, and finally we are back. So it is over at equilibriumcbd.com, but since it's been a while and many of you still haven't experienced really the power of using cannabinoids for healthy inflammatory-based responses, as well as calming the mind and body, that I wanted to make sure that you got a free bottle. So all qualifying orders right now over at Equa.life, over $129, are going to get a free bottle shipped to them. This is our all organic, full spectrum, 250 milligram CBD bottle that you can use on a daily basis if you'd like, or whenever you need it. And again, this will ship completely free to you on all orders over $129 inside of the US. Unfortunately, we cannot ship this internationally. That's not our rule. That is the international rules that we're not able to ship CBD oil around the world. So right now, again, all qualifying orders, you won't actually see it say CBD because we can't list that on Ecolife. It will say calming oil. That is how you know you will be getting your free bottle while supplies last. So while supplies last, all orders over $129 over at equa.life, get your free bottle of CBD. I'm telling you right now, you will not be disappointed. This has all the clinical effects that is talked about inside of CBD-based research, and I know that it's going to work for you. Head on over to equa.life while supplies last.